The first thing Daniel Mercer heard when he stepped off the bus wasn't applause or music or even his daughter's voice. It was silence. Not the peaceful kind, not the kind that lets you breathe. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a town that had moved on without him. He stood there on the cracked pavement of Maple Street, with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder and a folded flag tucked carefully inside it. 3 tours overseas had carved lines into his face that hadn't been there when he left. His right knee ached with every step. His left hand trembled when he wasn't paying attention, but none of that compared to the weight in his chest, because waiting for him at home wasn't a wife running into his arms. It was a 7-year-old girl who had learned how to live without him. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet power of community, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that even broken lives can be rebuilt. Daniel hadn't planned on coming back this way. He'd imagined fireworks in his daughter Lily's eyes. He'd imagined lifting her high into the air and hearing her laugh like she used to. But life had rewritten his plans long before he stepped off that bus. His wife, Emily, had died 2 years earlier in a car accident on a rain-slick highway. He'd received the news in a tent half a world away. He hadn't been there to hold her hand. He hadn't been there to comfort Lily. He hadn't been there at all, and guilt had followed him home like a shadow. The small blue house at the end of the street looked the same from the outside. The porch swing still creaked in the wind. The white paint was peeling near the windows, but the yard, once full of flowers Emily had planted, was now mostly weeds. Daniel unlocked the front door with hands that felt too big, too rough for the delicate memories inside. The air smelled faintly of dust and lavender. Lily stood in the hallway, clutching a stuffed rabbit that had once belonged to her mother. She didn't run to him, she just stared. And in her eyes, Daniel saw something that hurt more than any battlefield wound: uncertainty. The first few weeks were harder than combat. Daniel tried to slip back into fatherhood like it was a uniform he could put on. He packed school lunches. He braided Lily's hair badly, fumbling with rubber bands. He burned pancakes. He tried to laugh when she corrected him gently, telling him that Mommy used to cut the sandwiches into stars. At night, he sat on the edge of his bed and stared at the ceiling. The house creaked in unfamiliar ways. Every loud noise made his heart race. Fireworks from a distant baseball game sent him ducking instinctively to the floor. Lily had found him like that once, hands over his head, breathing hard. She hadn't said anything. She had just backed away quietly. That silence between them grew. Daniel thought he was protecting her by staying strong, by not crying, by not talking about the war, by not talking about Emily, but children can feel what adults try to hide. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter, his military benefits were delayed. The factory where he used to work had shut down. Every job application seemed to disappear into a void. Employers smiled politely at the word veteran, then hesitated at the mention of medical discharge. He started selling things. First the old lawnmower, then the television in the guest room. He skipped meals so Lily wouldn't notice the fridge thinning out. And through it all, he avoided eye contact with the neighbors, especially Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker. She lived next door in a pale yellow house with bright red geraniums lining the porch. She had been Emily's closest friend. When Daniel was deployed, she had helped with Lily's school pickups and doctor visits. She had attended Emily's funeral holding Lily's hand. Daniel couldn't face her. One afternoon, as he struggled to fix the broken fence in the backyard, his injured knee buckled and he fell hard onto the dirt. Pain shot through him, sharp and humiliating. He lay there longer than he needed to, staring up at the sky, wondering how a man who had survived war could be defeated by a wooden post. That was when he heard her voice from the other side of the fence. She didn't ask if he was okay. She didn't offer sympathy. She said one sentence that cut straight through his pride. "You don't have to fight this one alone, Daniel." He froze. The words weren't loud, they weren't dramatic, but they carried something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Permission. He pushed himself up slowly, brushing dirt from his hands. He avoided looking at her at first, but when he finally did, he saw no judgment in her eyes, no pity, just steady, unwavering concern. That evening she showed up at his door with a casserole dish and a quiet determination. Lily answered first, and for the first time since Daniel had returned, he heard his daughter laugh freely as Mrs. Whitaker knelt down to hug her. Dinner that night wasn't about charity, it was about conversation. Mrs. Whitaker talked about Emily's garden, about how Lily had once insisted on planting sunflowers because they smiled at the sun. She reminded Daniel of the man he had been before the war, before the grief. She told him stories of how Lily would sit by the window every evening, watching the street, waiting for a bus that never came on time. Daniel listened, and something inside him began to crack open. The next morning, Mrs. Whitaker knocked again. This time, she had a list of local veteran support groups and the name of a counselor who specialized in trauma recovery. She didn't push. She simply placed the paper on the kitchen table and said she would watch Lily if he ever needed time. For days, the paper sat untouched. Pride is a stubborn thing, especially for men taught to endure quietly. But one night, after waking from a nightmare so vivid he could still smell smoke in the air, Daniel found Lily standing in his doorway, tears streaming down her cheeks. Because his shouting had frightened her, he saw himself through her eyes, a stranger. The next morning, he picked up the phone. Therapy wasn't easy. The first session felt like peeling open old wounds with dull blades. But the counselor didn't rush him. She helped him untangle the guilt from the grief, the anger from the fear. She helped him understand that surviving didn't mean he had failed. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Daniel began to change. He started sleeping through the night. He started talking about Emily with Lily, sharing stories instead of burying them. They planted new sunflowers in the backyard together. He let Lily teach him how to braid hair properly, laughing when he finally got it right. Mrs. Whitaker became a constant presence, not intrusive, just steady. She helped Daniel repaint the fence. She introduced him to a friend who managed a local hardware store, and within weeks, Daniel had a part-time job repairing tools and assisting customers. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. The first paycheck felt heavier than his duffel bag had on the day he returned. One evening, as summer painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, Daniel sat on the porch swing with Lily curled against his side. The sunflowers in the yard stood tall, their bright faces turned toward the fading light. He realized something then. The war hadn't ended when he came home, but healing had begun when he allowed someone else into the battle. Months passed. The house filled again with small sounds. Lily humming while drawing, the scrape of Daniel's boots on the porch, Mrs. Whitaker's soft laughter drifting over the fence. The weeds were gone, replaced by fresh blooms. Daniel still had difficult days. Loud noises still startled him. Grief still visited unexpectedly, but he no longer faced those moments alone. On the anniversary of Emily's passing, Daniel and Lily visited her grave together. Mrs. Whitaker joined them quietly, standing a respectful distance away. Daniel knelt, placing a small bouquet of sunflowers against the headstone. He didn't apologize this time. He didn't drown in guilt. He simply promised to keep trying. As they walked back toward the car, Lily slipped her hand into his and squeezed it tightly. She looked up at him with eyes that no longer held uncertainty. They held trust. And in that silent exchange, Daniel understood the full weight of the sentence that had changed everything. You don't have to fight this one alone. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone who carried silent battles, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue spreading stories of hope. And before we end, I have one special request for you. Comment the word together below if you believe no one should have to fight their hardest battles alone. Because sometimes strength isn't about how much pain you can endure in silence. Sometimes